I still remember the moment as vividly as if it happened minutes ago. I was standing by the office coffee machine, adding a dash of oat milk to my morning blend, when Ryan walked in. He wasn't just any CEO, he was the founder's son, freshly crowned, strutting with entitlement that seemed to fill the room. He didn't greet me. He didn't even glance in my direction with the courtesy of acknowledgement. His eyes swept past me as if I were part of the furniture, an invisible presence not worth his time. Then, in that detached, commanding tone, he threw out the words that shifted the course of my career. "Lily, I need to see you in my office. Now." It wasn't phrased as a request, it was an order. For nearly 11 years, this company had been my second home. I had built the client services department from scratch when it was nothing but a vague idea on a whiteboard. I negotiated more than 100 contracts, often staying late to polish the details that could make or break a deal. I had trained most of the team that now sat outside Ryan's office, people who relied on me not only for leadership but for stability. Yet none of that mattered to him. I followed him down the corridor, tension coiling in my chest with each step. When we reached his office, he didn't even sit down. He turned to face me, papers in hand, his expression flat, cold, and disturbingly casual. "You're fired." That was it. No preamble, no reasoning, no recognition of the decade I had invested here. His voice carried no hesitation, no regret, just the mechanical delivery of a sentence that could unravel 11 years of dedication in 3 seconds. My first reaction was disbelief. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he replied, flipping through the stack of papers like he was deciding what to have for lunch. "We don't need lazy people like you dragging this place down. Collect your things. Leave effective immediately." The word stung, not because it was true. It wasn't, but because it revealed how little he knew me, how little he cared to know. My heart pounded in my ears, a rush of anger and humiliation rising in equal measure. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to remind him that without me, the client services department wouldn't even exist. But instead, I made a different choice. I smiled, a calm, deliberate smile that wasn't warm or forgiving, but controlled. "Understood," I said evenly. "Have a nice day, Ryan." I walked out of his office with my head high, but inside I was trembling. My teammates looked up as I passed, confusion flickering across their faces. A few started to rise, ready to ask questions, but I gave them a small shake of the head. Don't make this harder." Back at my desk, I packed my belongings in silence. My hands moved automatically, placing framed photos, books, and notes into a box, but my mind was a storm. 11 years of sacrifices, missed family dinners, weekends spent drafting proposals, phone calls taken in the middle of personal crises. I had given this company more than I had given myself, and in return I was dismissed with the flick of a wrist by a man who thought leadership was about power, not responsibility. As I drove home, memories came in waves. The late nights, the holidays I had worked through, the tears I had swallowed after my divorce while still picking up client calls. I had given everything, and in Ryan's eyes, I was nothing. Yet beneath the sting of betrayal, a different emotion lingered. Not rage, not despair, something quieter, sharper, curiosity. Why? Why now? The timing was strange. We were on the verge of finalizing one of the company's largest contracts, a deal I had shepherded for 6 relentless months. I knew every clause, every expectation, every nuance of that client's needs. The final review meeting was set for Friday, and I was the only one who could lead it. So why fire me now? That question haunted me long after I packed the last box, long after I shut my apartment door behind me, and long after I tried to sleep. The next morning, just after 9, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After yesterday, I wasn't sure I had the strength for another blow. But curiosity won. "Lily, it's Mr. Cole." The voice sent a jolt down my spine. The real CEO. The man who had hired me over a decade ago, after a single interview. His tone was sharp, controlled, but beneath it I could hear a thread of disbelief. "I just walked into the office," he said. "Why the hell did you pack up and leave? What happened?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Your son fired me. Silence stretched on the other end. Then, a sharp inhale. Yesterday? Yesterday. Yes, he said. I was lazy. That I wasn't needed anymore. Another pause, heavier this time. Papers rustled in the background, followed by a loud thud, as though something had been slammed onto a desk. Did he even read your contract? I frowned, confused. What do you mean? He's supposed to finalize the Kingswell deal today, isn't he? Yes, I replied. We were scheduled to meet them at 11. Jesus Christ. His voice cracked. Then came another shuffle of paper. Lily, your contract has a clause. One, I insisted on after the last acquisition fiasco. You're not just the account manager, you're the only authorized negotiator for the Kingswell deal. Legally, ethically, practically, he cannot close that contract without you. The words hit like a thunderclap. My breath caught. All at once, the puzzle pieces slid into place. Ryan hadn't read it. He had no idea what he'd done. He fired you without realizing that. Mr. Cole continued. His voice, usually measured, trembled with fury. That contract will collapse. Unless you're in the room. Do you understand? The entire deal rests on you. I froze. For hours I had replayed yesterday's scene, wondering why it happened, searching for logic in the madness. And now, here it was. Ryan had acted blindly, recklessly, and in doing so, he had pulled the trigger on his own foot. Mr. Cole hung up abruptly, but I could feel his anger through the silence that followed. I sat motionless on my couch, coffee growing cold beside me. For the first time since leaving the office, a sound escaped me, a quiet, bitter laugh. After 11 years of relentless work, after sacrifices that had cost me pieces of my life, this was how it ended. Not because I failed, not because I was irrelevant, but because a spoiled man-boy thought playing CEO meant discarding people like they were pawns in a game. But now, the power wasn't in his hands. It was in mine. At 10:13, my phone buzzed again. This time, Ryan's number flashed on the screen. I let it ring out. Moments later, reception called. Then legal. Then accounting. The phone lit up like a Christmas tree buzzing nonstop. I didn't answer a single one. Finally, a voicemail icon blinked at me. I tapped it open. Lily. Hi. It's Ryan. Listen, there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I might have acted too fast. We need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. Not sorry. Not even a hollow corporate apology. Just panic wrapped in politeness. I sipped my cold coffee and stared at the phone. The roles had shifted. Yesterday, he dismissed me, like furniture. Today, he was the one begging for my presence. And I realized, with startling clarity, that for the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. I had leverage. I had control. The betrayal still stung. Yeah, but beneath it, something new was blooming. A fire, steady and sharp. Ryan thought he had buried me. In reality, he had handed me the upper hand. At 10:32 a.m., my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't Ryan or reception. It was Nicole, a former colleague turned friend, someone who had transferred to marketing a year earlier. I picked up. Lily, she whispered, her voice carrying the thrill of office gossip, mixed with genuine concern. You won't believe what's happening here. Try more. Ryan just got chewed out by his dad, in front of everyone. The meeting room was full. Mr. Cole walked in, slammed the Kingswell contract on the table, and asked one question. Did you read this before firing Lily? I leaned back on my couch, a smile tugging at my lips. Ryan tried to bluff, said something about moving in a new direction, reevaluating roles. But Mr. Cole didn't buy it. He flipped straight to the clause. The one you always talked about. The one that makes you the sole negotiator on Kingswell. I could almost see it unfolding. Ryan squirming, pale, trapped in the web of his own arrogance. Nicole continued, her voice brimming with energy. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Everyone saw it. Mr. Cole told him straight. If this deal falls through, your position here becomes negotiable. That sentence was the crack in Ryan's armor. The golden boy had finally been put on notice. Nicole paused. I don't know what you're planning, but whatever it is, you've got the upper hand. After we hung up, I sat quietly, staring at the city skyline. For years, I had endured thankless overtime, quiet dismissals of my ideas, and the slow erosion of recognition. Yesterday, Ryan made me feel disposable. Today, he was the one dangling on a thread. Minutes later, a new message arrived, this time from Mr. Cole himself. Lily, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in, not just for the deal, but so we can talk privately. It was tempting, but I wasn't about to rush back like nothing had happened. Ryan's mistake wasn't just a managerial misstep. It was about respect, trust, and years of work dismissed in a heartbeat. If I was going to return, it had to be on my terms. So I typed a message, carefully worded. I'll consider finalizing the Kingswell deal, but only under specific conditions. I'd like to speak with you directly beforehand. Send. By noon, I was walking through the main lobby of the building, not the employee entrance. The lobby. Every eye turned. Whispers followed. Yesterday, I had been fired. Today, I was back, walking tall, carrying a statement in every step. The receptionist nearly jumped to her feet. Miss Harris, Mr. Cole is expecting you. Right this way. As she led me down the hall, conversations hushed. People peered over cubicle walls. The air was thick with tension, like the building itself was waiting for a verdict. Mr. Cole stood at his office door, not smiling, but respectful. Lily, he said with a nod. I walked past him and took a seat across from the oak desk that had witnessed so many of my victories. And now, my dismissal. He closed the door, exhaled deeply, and said, I made a mistake. A big one. I gave my son too much authority, too fast. What he did was unprofessional, disrespectful, and reckless. It jeopardized a deal we've worked half a year to secure. I met his gaze. Yes, it did. He nodded slowly, regret written across his face. I read your contract again this morning. Every word. You had full autonomy over Kingswell. That clause was there for a reason. You didn't deserve what happened yesterday. I want you back with full authority. Whatever conditions you need, we'll make it work. I leaned back, calm but firm. I'll return, but only if it's in writing. Clear autonomy. No interference from Ryan. And this can't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone. For a long moment silence hung between us. Then he gave a slow, deliberate nod. You have my word. For the first time in days, I felt the balance shift entirely. This wasn't just a return. It was a reset. The moment I stepped out of Mr. Cole's office, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Ryan was down the hall, arms crossed, pretending to be deep in conversation with a junior executive. But the second I appeared, his gaze snapped to mine. His face was tight, crimson at the edges. I didn't flinch. I didn't break stride. I walked past him, calm and unbothered, and in that instant, I knew he realized something he had never considered before. His control was slipping. By 1 o'clock, the boardroom was ready. The Kingswell team had arrived, punctual and poised. The meeting was set for 1:30 sharp, but I insisted on using the time to review the documents. One last time, each clause, each adjustment, each translation had to be flawless. Trust was everything with Kingswell, and any hint of disorder could destroy the deal. Through the glass walls, I saw Ryan pacing outside like a caged animal. Mr. Cole intercepted him, their muffled voices rising into sharp bursts. Then Mr. Cole's hand shot up, silencing his son mid-sentence. Ryan's jaw clenched, his face reddening. He glanced at me, eyes filled with rage and humiliation, before storming away. That was the last glimpse I caught of him that day. At 1:30 sharp, Mr. Osine, the Kingswell CEO, entered with his aides, a man of precision. He valued respect above all else. I greeted him in Arabic, the language he respected most. His stern face softened into a rare smile. You remembered, he said warmly. Respect goes a long way, I replied. The meeting began. The air was taut with importance. Yet I felt calm. Every question they raised, I had an answer. Every concern, I had anticipated. For 2 hours, we moved through the details like clockwork. There were no gaps, no hesitations. Finally, Mr. Sines leaned back, nodded, and extended his hand. It is done, he said. We shook hands. The Kingswell deal was signed. Relief washed over the room. But more than relief, I felt vindication. Ryan had tried to erase me. But in the end, the very contract he ignored had brought me back stronger. After the meeting, Mr. Cole approached me, genuine gratitude in his eyes. You saved us, he said quietly. I owe you more than an apology. You owe your company a leader, I replied, one who knows the difference between power and responsibility. He didn't argue. He only nodded, weight of my words sinking into the silence between us. Later, as I walked to my car, the tension that had consumed me for 48 hours finally began lift. But I wasn't naive. I knew Ryan. Men like him didn't disappear. They retreated, regrouped, and returned with sharper claws. By the following week, the Kingswell deal had made headlines in industry newsletters. Cole & Company secures historic partnership through tailored strategy and multilingual leadership. My name wasn't mentioned, but inside the office, everyone knew who had sealed the deal. My inbox filled with quiet congratulations. Messages trickled in from colleagues who had once dismissed me in meetings, now praising my leadership under pressure. Juniors I had mentored years ago wrote notes thanking me for being an example. I appreciated the words, but I also knew how fickle people could be. When the wind shifts, loyalty bends with it. Still, the atmosphere in the office lightened. Laughter returned to the break room. The tension that had gripped the halls began to ease. And though Miss Cole had made it clear, Ryan was no longer involved in high-level decision-making, I could feel an undercurrent, a quiet unease, a reminder that storms don't vanish. They gather strength in silence. That night, as I closed my laptop, I thought back to the exact moment it all began. Ryan standing coldly in his office, declaring I was fired. Back then, I left with a deliberate smile. Today, I knew why. Because dignity, once chosen, has a way of circling back with more power than any title or threat. This was more than a comeback. It was a declaration. For a brief moment, it felt like the storm had passed. The Kingswell deal was signed, the office atmosphere lighter, and Ryan pushed out of major decisions. But deep down, I knew better. People like Ryan didn't accept defeat. They lingered in shadows, searching for cracks, and soon the cracks began to show. It started small. My expense report for the Kingswell trip, airfare, hotel, mileage was delayed. Odd, but not unusual. A week later, another reimbursement hung in limbo. When I followed up, finance claimed they had never received the paperwork, though I had submitted it personally. Next came the documents. Proposals I had prepared were returned unsigned, no explanation given. A contract draft I had finalized appeared back in my inbox, missing key terms. At first, I thought it was clerical oversight, but patterns don't lie. Then came the email. It looked like it came from my account. Same signature, same formatting, but the content was wrong. Critical details about a client had been altered, then forwarded to an overseas partner. Thankfully, that partner trusted me enough to call directly. He laughed it off as a mistake, but beneath his humor, I heard concern. Doubt had been planted. I reported the incident to IT immediately. They ran checks and came back with an unsettling conclusion. No sign of external hacking. The email originated inside the office. Someone had my credentials. That's when I knew Ryan wasn't done. He had failed to fire me outright, So now, he had shifted tactics. Not confrontation, sabotage. Subtle, deliberate, designed to make me look incompetent. Slow poison, instead of a quick strike. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it before. Early in my career, a director used the same tricks. Cutting off resources, losing approvals, whispering that certain employees were unstable until they quit under pressure. It had worked on others. But I wasn't 22 anymore. I wasn't green, and I wasn't going to vanish quietly. So I documented everything. Every missing form, every delayed signature, every error I hadn't made. I kept a private log, times, dates, conversations, not for revenge, for survival. Because in environments like this, paper trails matter more than emotions. Then came the moment that confirmed it. One afternoon, I was walking past a conference room when I heard Ryan's voice. Too loud, too smug to be private. She's unstable, he was saying. Since she came back, she's been erratic, aggressive. I don't think she's fit to manage high-pressure clients. I froze outside the door, listening. I'm just saying, he continued. Maybe we should start thinking about succession planning for client services. She's clearly overextended. Another voice responded, hesitant. A newer executive, perhaps. But the Kingswell deal, she pulled that off. Under serious pressure. Ryan scoffed. She got lucky. We can't run a company on luck. The words stung, not because they held truth, but because they were calculated. He wasn't just trying to undermine me. He was planting seeds, poisoning the well, so that when mistakes appeared, people would already believe they came from me. I walked away, silent but cold. This wasn't incompetence on his part. It was strategy. That evening, I stayed late. The office was quiet, the halls dim. I sat alone in the glass meeting room, the city glowing beyond the windows. My thoughts were steady, not frantic. I knew what was happening. Ryan was waging a silent war, and unlike him, I wasn't playing to save face. I was playing to win. The office grew colder that week, not because of the weather, but because of the tension that seeped into every corner. Conversations dropped when I walked by. Smiles were forced, eyes averted. Something was shifting, and I could feel it pressing against the walls. Late one evening, as I sat finishing reports, I heard the door creak open. Mr. Cole stepped inside, carrying a thick folder. He looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. "You're still here?" he asked. I gestured to the papers. "Work doesn't finish itself." He set the folder on the table. "Your revised contract. Everything we agreed on." I flipped it open. The clauses were airtight. Autonomy over Kingswell. Protection from interference. Written guarantees. I nodded, solid. He didn't sit. Instead, he lingered near the glass wall, staring at the city. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "Too many things have been misfiled, documents altered, emails misplaced. I've started an internal audit." I looked up sharply. "You think it's Ryan?" His jaw tightened. "I know it's him, but I needed to see how far he'd go." "You're protecting the company," I said. He shook his head slowly. "I was trying to protect both of you. But maybe it's too late for one." Our eyes met across the dim room. I closed the folder and said quietly, "I don't need protection. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave." He didn't answer. He just nodded, turned, and left me with the silence. The audit began in earnest. The next morning, an old storage room was converted into a war room. Stacks of files, glowing monitors, timelines scrawled across a whiteboard. David, the lead auditor, greeted me with a polite nod. "Thanks for coming, Lily. We need to ask you a few questions." I took a seat. He pulled up a file on the screen. "This email, flagged last week, it originated from a shared workstation near the break room. Credentials were manually entered. So someone had my login? Not guessed." He corrected. "Copied. Most likely someone inside the office." My chest tightened. And this wasn't the only one. He exchanged a glance With his team. No. We found multiple irregularities, spreadsheets altered, sign-offs removed, emails rewritten, always under your name, always traced to shared machines. My fingers clenched around the chair. This is coordinated. He nodded. We've narrowed the access list. There's a clear pattern tied to Ryan's executive assistant's login. There it was. The proof I had been waiting for. David's tone was careful. We're not accusing anyone yet. But sabotage is evident. I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. Sabotage, finally spoken aloud. So what happens now? He folded his arms. Mr. Cole asked us to present our findings directly to him. No filters. The board will review afterward. I'll be there, I said immediately. David raised his brows. You're not required. I will be there. My voice was steady. If this comes out, I want to look everyone in the eye. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed faces of colleagues who had left quietly over the past year, talented people in their 30s and 40s, vanishing with little notice. Back then, I thought it was natural turnover. Now, I wondered how many had been quietly pushed, just as Ryan was trying to push me. By dawn, I was resolved. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about shining light into the shadows Ryan had cultivated. If truth was coming, I wasn't going to hide from it. I arrived early to the executive boardroom. The next morning, the air was heavy, charged with anticipation. Mr. Cole stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, his reflection framed against the city skyline. He didn't turn when I entered, but I could sense the tension radiating from him. One by one, the auditors filed in. David, and two others, carrying laptops and thick binders. Then, 10 minutes late, Ryan walked in. He looked smug, phone in hand, arrogance wrapped around him like armor. But when his eyes landed on me, he froze. She's not on the audit committee, he said sharply. Mr. Cole didn't move from the window. She's here at my request. Ryan shifted, unease flickering across his face. This is supposed to be internal, confidential. I leaned forward, my voice calm, but cutting. Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate emails. His head snapped toward me. That's ridiculous. David cleared his throat. We've traced multiple irregularities. Logins tied to your assistant's account. Connect directly to sabotaged documents and falsified emails. The timeline is clear. Ryan's practiced smirk wavered. You're reaching. She's bitter because I let her go. I didn't blink. You didn't let me go, Ryan. You sabotaged me, and you almost tanked the biggest deal this company has seen in 5 years. Mr. Cole finally turned, his voice low, edged with steel. I gave you a chance. More than one. And you've done nothing but tear down the people trying to build something real. Ryan swallowed. But his arrogance fought to survive. This isn't what you think. No, Mr. Cole said, stepping forward. It's worse. Silence filled the room, broken only by the shuffle of papers. As David slid the final report across the table, the evidence was undeniable. Login traces, altered spreadsheets, missing files, fabricated HR complaints. A pattern too deliberate to dismiss. Ryan's mask cracked. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Mr. Cole's voice carried the weight of finality. Until the board reviews this, you are suspended. Effective immediately. Ryan opened his mouth. But the words never came. His gaze darted to me, not with rage this time, but disbelief, like he couldn't fathom that his usual tricks had failed. He turned on his heel and walked out in silence. The door shut behind him with a soft click, louder than any slam. The room exhaled. Mr. Cole sank into his chair, shoulders sagging. He looked not like a CEO, but like a father grieving the collapse of his own hopes. I failed him, he murmured. As a leader, maybe even as a father. I studied him for a long moment before speaking. You can't lead someone who refuses to grow, but you can still lead this company. Our eyes met. For the first time since this war began, I saw clarity in his expression. Not just regret, He nodded, a decision settling inside him. 2 weeks later, the board's ruling came down. Ryan's suspension became termination. The official announcement was quiet, citing breaches of ethical conduct and internal misconduct. No lawsuits, no press release. Just a quiet erasure from the company's history. But word spread anyway. In the cafeteria, in hushed emails, in late-night calls between departments. Everyone knew Ryan hadn't just sabotaged me. He had jeopardized the integrity of the company. And that was something even his last name couldn't protect him from. When I heard the final verdict, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't need it. What I felt was steadiness. I had weathered the storm. And for once, the storm wasn't mine to carry. 2 weeks had passed since the audit meeting, yet the echoes of that morning still pulsed through every hallway. Ryan's name was now spoken only in whispers, his once arrogant smirk reduced to office folklore. The board had moved quickly. The evidence was too strong, too damning. His suspension was finalized into termination. There would be no redemption arc, no second chance. He was gone. I thought I'd feel triumphant when the news landed. Instead, I felt calm. Not victorious, just steady. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. A few days later, Mr. Cole called me into his office. The door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing us in silence. He sat at his desk, a folder in front of him, but he didn't open it right away. His expression was thoughtful, almost somber. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he began, "about the kind of company I want to leave behind." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "You've shown more leadership in the past month than many executives show in their entire careers. You protected our biggest deal, handled a public humiliation with composure, and endured sabotage without losing professionalism. That's not just competence, that's resilience. And that's the kind of person I want helping me run this company." He slid the folder across the desk. I opened it, and my breath caught. A promotion letter. Director of Client Strategy. An executive-level position. A direct line to him. I looked up, startled. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said. "That's why you deserve it." The weight of his words sank in, but so did the responsibility. I hesitated, then spoke firmly. "If I accept this, I want more than a title. I want a say in how we move forward. I don't just want to manage accounts. I want to rebuild the culture. Fairly, transparently. No one else should go through what I did." For a moment, he studied me, then smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." Later that evening, I sat alone in my new office. Temporary, but still larger than the space I had once occupied. A blank nameplate waited outside the door. I stared at it, reflecting on the years I had walked these halls, wondering if anyone truly saw the work I put in. The late nights, the client saves, the fires I put out without credit. For so long, I thought staying silent was the safest way forward. Don't cause friction. Don't demand recognition. Just keep working. But silence had nearly cost me everything. Now, I knew better. Competence is not arrogance. Professionalism is not weakness. And dignity is not negotiable. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and sabotaged, but I had not been defeated. I had refused to beg, refused to break, and that refusal had carried me here, into this office, onto this new path. The promotion wasn't just a new role. It was proof that the storm I survived had meaning, that resilience could reshape not just my career, but the future of the company itself. As I leaned back in the chair, a quiet thought settled in my chest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. And now, for the first time, I had the authority to make it real. The weeks that followed my promotion moved quickly, but I knew from the start, this role couldn't just be about holding a new title. It had to be about repair. The company had been cracked, not just by Ryan's arrogance, but by the culture of silence that allowed it to spread. If things were going to change, I had to start from the inside. The first step was reopening communication. Too many employees had been walking on eggshells for months, maybe years. I scheduled open forums with my department, small groups, Informal settings. At first, people were cautious, answering Carrie, watching my face for signs of judgment. But as the sessions continued, the walls began to fall. They spoke about workloads, unfair practices, ignored suggestions. They spoke about fear of retaliation, if they raised their voices. I listened. I wrote everything down. And then I acted. I reinstated projects that had been shelved out of spite. I pulled talented staff back into conversations they had been excluded from. I rebuilt teams based on merit, not favoritism. For employees who had left unfairly, I reached out, inviting them to return if they wished. Some did, others declined. But their gratitude was genuine. They told me it mattered just to be asked. The second step was protection. I created an anonymous reporting system. Secure, accessible, impossible to trace. No one would fear speaking the truth again. Retaliation had been Ryan's favorite weapon. I wanted to break it once and for all. The third step was mentorship. Younger employees often came to me quietly, asking how I had endured the storm. Their eyes carried both admiration and fear. They had seen what Ryan tried to do. They had seen me walk through it without breaking. "How did you stay strong?" one asked softly. I told them the truth. You don't always get to choose your battles. Sometimes they come to you. But you always get to choose who you become in the middle of. That truth seemed to resonate. Slowly, I noticed a shift. People lifted their heads higher in meetings. They spoke with more confidence. They stopped tiptoeing. Still, I wasn't naive. Not everyone celebrated the changes. Some managers who had benefited from silence resisted. Some rolled their eyes behind closed doors. But the momentum was building. And momentum is hard to stop once it takes root. Meanwhile, news of Ryan trickled back in whispers. He was interviewing at smaller firms out of state, but his reputation followed him. Some said Mr. Cole had quietly ensured his son's name wouldn't be dragged through the mud. A final act of fatherly protection. Maybe that was true. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Ryan was no longer my battle. One afternoon, while walking through the office, I passed the glass-walled boardroom, where the Kingswell deal had been signed. I paused, remembering everything. The firing, the calls, the sabotage, the public fallout. That deal had changed the trajectory of my career. But the real turning point had come earlier. In Ryan's office, when I smiled at him and walked away with dignity instead of begging. That choice had rewritten everything. Now, as director of client strategy, my mission wasn't to hold power. It was to ensure no one else was ever erased the way I had been. To make sure fairness outlived fear. Rebuilding wasn't easy. But every step forward reminded me of one thing. Storms test structures. The weak collapse. The strong rebuild. And I had chosen to rebuild. The company newsletter arrived one crisp Monday morning. Its headline bold: Company secures historic partnership with Middle Eastern distributor. My name wasn't in print, but everyone inside the walls knew whose strategy had sealed it. My inbox filled with quiet congratulations from juniors I had mentored years ago, from colleagues who once dismissed me, even from managers who had overlooked me in meetings. The recognition felt good, but I didn't mistake it for loyalty. Praise is easy when the storm has passed. What mattered was what I built in the aftermath. Each day, I walked the halls with a different kind of awareness. Employees looked at me not with pity, not with suspicion, but with respect. Some smiled. Others stopped to talk. The atmosphere was lighter. Laughter slowly returning to break rooms, where tension had once suffocated every word. The culture wasn't fixed yet, but the cracks had begun to heal. Still, I remained cautious. Power shifts leave scars, and I knew Ryan's ghost still lingered in whispers. Sabotage may have been removed, but mistrust takes longer to fade. That's why I focused on embedding accountability into the very fabric of the department. Policies weren't enough. It had to be lived, modeled, reinforced every day. One evening, after a long meeting with my team, I sat alone in my office. Lights dimmed, staring at the skyline. The memory of Ryan's voice echoed faintly in my head. "You're fired." I remembered the sting, the humiliation, the way my chest had burned with betrayal. But more than that, I remembered my response. Calm, deliberate, a smile that said, "You will not break me." That moment had been the true turning point. Not the Kingswell deal, not the audit, not even the promotion. The shift happened when I chose dignity over desperation, when I refused to beg for a place I had already earned, and that I realized was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Not a single deal, not a title, but a culture where competence was never mistaken for arrogance, where professionalism was never mistaken for weakness, and where silence was no longer mistaken for compliance. I had been underestimated, I had been dismissed, I had been sabotaged, but I had not been defeated. And because I had endured without bitterness, I now carried something greater than survival. I carried the authority to reshape the future. Weeks turned into months, and the company slowly began to look different. Teams collaborated more freely, younger employees spoke up without fear. The anonymous reporting system caught issues early, not after they had festered. People started to believe that fairness wasn't just a slogan, it was possible. As for Ryan, the last I heard, he was still searching for a foothold in smaller firms out of state. His name no longer carried weight. His entitlement no longer bought silence. Some said his father had protected him from public disgrace. But even if that was true, reputation is a shadow you can't outrun. I didn't dwell on him. My story wasn't about his downfall. It was about my rise. One afternoon, passing by the glass meeting room where Kingswell had been signed, I paused. The room was empty, sunlight spilling across the table. For a moment, I just stood there, remembering that single deal had changed the course of my career. But the real victory wasn't ink on paper. It was in the moment I realized my worth wasn't negotiable. The legacy I would leave was simple. Storms may come, but resilience is stronger. And when dignity leads the way, no one, not even a CEO's son, can take that from you.